Welcome to Conservation Conversations, the podcast where we discuss emerging technologies, global trends, and the future of biodiversity conservation. I'm your host, Sean O'Brien, President and CEO of NatureServe, where we leverage science and technology to protect endangered species and ecosystems around the world. Welcome to this month's issue of Conservation Conversations with me, Sean O'Brien. I'm here this week with Thomas Brooks, the head of the IUCN's Science Knowledge Unit, where he is responsible for the scientific underpinning of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature's knowledge products and helping to strengthen the culture of science across the union. Before joining IUCN in 2003, Tom was actually the chief scientist here at NatureServe. So this is sort of a little bit of a homecoming, and we're excited about that. Tom is an ornithologist by training with a BA in geography and a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology. And he's been working with IUCN for a long time, in fact, before he was an employee there. And he serves on the steering committee for the Species Survival Commission and the Redlist Committee. And if you need anything to read, you can pick any one of the 288 scientific and popular articles that Tom is author or co-author on and get started in learning about conservation. So Tom, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
And everybody here at NatureServe is super excited that you're on the show because everybody misses having you here on our staff. But we'll let that go for now. And what I really wanted to ask you about, because you've been involved in this business for a long time, and you've done a lot of work at IUCN, but you also were chief scientist here at NatureServe. And I was wondering if there's any accomplishments from your time at NatureServe that you're especially proud of.
Sure. Yes. So I was lucky enough to serve as chief scientist at NatureServe from 2010 to 2012, and I think I'd highlight two accomplishments from my time with you with NatureServe, which stand out in particular. First, working with Bruce Young, NatureServe chief zoologist, we were successful in winning a grant from the US National Science Foundation's Dimensions of Biodiversity program with the objective of completing the IUCN Redlist assessments for all Western Hemisphere reptile species. So about 4,000 species, and to analyze the data resulting from that. And that work, even though the award was 8 years ago now, the work is still very much current. It's in fact just recently had the final I's dotted and T's crossed. Recently being completed and will be published later this year. One other key success, I think, from my time at NatureServe was that we were successful in attracting funding from the MacArthur Foundation to develop a set of dashboards to support nations in tracking biodiversity indicators towards international commitments for nature. And this is also work that, keeping in touch with NatureServe, I understand that NatureServe is still very much active in, and is in fact now playing very much a lead role within the Global Biodiversity Indicators Partnership, in building from that initial dashboard work to develop what's being called a target tracker system for the emerging new post 2020 global biodiversity framework. So two areas of history there, both of which have echoes through to the present day.
Well, I'd like to point out to the listeners that we did not collude on those answers, and those are great from our perspective, because you're right, the Global Reptile Assessment is going to be published later this year, and we're planning to do a conservation conversation about that. So we're really excited about that. That's really important work. And the indicators, the target tracker information is also a very active program for us. And you're right, it's really an international footprint for NatureServe that really has global impact. And we're really excited about how that's all going to fit in. And it's relevant, I think, to some of the things we're going to be talking about a little bit later in the show with the World Conservation Congress. So this is great. So yeah, thank you for getting those going for us. So another thing that I think is an important part of your career, obviously, because you take a lot of time to communicate about the work that you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been an author or co-author on 288 different articles, is educating people about conservation. And, so that's an important part of the role, I think, in terms of getting buy-in and getting people interested in this. And so somebody probably inspired you, and you're hoping to inspire other people. So I'm curious about your inspiration. Who inspired you to get involved in conservation and to do the work you do?
Thanks for the kind words there. Let's see. I'll try to roll back the clock, roll back the years to highlight a few key people or key formative events inspired me through my career. I guess first, as with anybody, my parents' role was fundamental, nurturing a love of nature in me as a child, getting me out birding, getting me out exploring the woods and hills and beaches of Sussex in the southern UK where I grew up. Then maybe fasting forward a bit. I was an undergraduate student in the University of Cambridge, and my time in Cambridge was really lucky enough to coincide with a moment in history through the early 90s, which was the very first comprehensive application of the IUCN Red List, which we'll talk some more about, I think, with that work being led by Nigel Collar from what is now BirdLife International, who served as an amazing inspiration for myself and for a wonderful set of peers that I was lucky enough to go through university with. Then as a PhD student in the University of Tennessee, I should also highlight the role of my PhD supervisor, Stuart Pym, who taught me an enormous amount about conservation science, even before conservation science was really a discipline in its own right, and how that can and should interface with conservation policy and conservation practice.
Yeah, I think Stuart's had a pretty broad influence on a lot of people, actually, over time. So you mentioned IUCN there in your answer, and we talked about it earlier, and of course that's where you work. For listeners who aren't as enmeshed in the business as you and I are, and we were talking earlier about the hazards of acronyms, can you explain what the IUCN is and what does it mean to be a member, and just sort of help us understand what we're talking about when we say that?
Absolutely. So IUCN, 4 letters: International Union for Conservation of Nature. Each of those 4 words is fundamental. IUCN is indeed international. It brings together the world's conservation community, hence the union there for bringing together. And then conservation of nature as the shared vision, the shared theme. So IUCN as a union seeks to share data, information, knowledge, and influence on policy and practice across the membership, the union membership, to advance a shared vision from across the union, a vision of a just world which values and conserves nature. So what does that actually mean to be a member of the International Union for Conservation of Nature? IUCN's members are institutions, so we're talking about actors which are at an organizational level, and IUCN's membership there encompasses what we could call two houses. A government house and a civil society house. The Government House brings together more than 200 states and government agencies. And the Civil Society House brings together more than 1,000 civil society organizations. And crucially, the votes and the voices and the weight of governance of those two houses is exactly equal. So the combined voice of civil society organizations has exactly the same weight, sits exactly alongside that of governments. It's a very unusual kind of forum, and maybe a product of the time when IUCN was established in immediately after the Second World War, 1948. Specifically, digging into those two houses maybe a tiny bit more, civil society means several things. It means international NGOs, international non-governmental organizations like NatureServe, of course. NatureServe exactly. has been a member of IUCN for very many years. It means national non-governmental organizations. And that category makes up the largest number of IUCN members numerically. So there are nearly 100 national non-governmental organization members of IUCN from the USA alone, for example. And then it also means indigenous peoples organizations, which is an important and really quite new and recent development. IUCN's Indigenous Peoples Organization membership category is new from 2016. It was introduced in the World Conservation Congress in Hawaii in 2016, and already there are now 23 Indigenous Peoples Organization members of IUCN, including 3 from the USA, from Hawaii. Maybe to switch over to say a word about the government house of IUCN. Government membership of the Union includes both states in their own right, so the USA and Mexico and Canada, for example, are IUCN state members at the level of the entire country. But it also encompasses government agency members, so that, for example, within the United States, NOAA and USAID and the Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management are all IUCN members themselves, in addition to the US at a state level, at a government level. And finally, maybe important to highlight here, next month, IUCN members will debate and consider approval of a new government membership category for subnational government organizations like states or provinces or indeed even cities.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that's going to be a key area of debate at the World Conservation Congress coming up next month.
Right. So I want to talk about the Union's Congress here in a few minutes, but I wanted to check first. So one of the things that IUCN is probably best known for is the Red List. The Union does many other things, but that's the one that I think is most commonly known. What is the Red List? What does it mean to be red listed? And we're also talking about green listing now, aren't we?
Sure. So as you say, the IUCN Red List is I think it's fair to say the best known and most deeply rooted product and process of IUCN, dating back to the early 1960s. And crucially, the process of red listing is the process of assessing the risk of species extinction. To date, the Red List has assessed extinction risk for more than 130,000 species around the world. Maybe 30,000 of those already have multiple assessments, repeat assessments of their extinction risk to enable understanding of change over time. And in total, about a quarter of those 130,000 or so species have been assessed as threatened with a high risk of extinction in the medium term future. The resulting knowledge is fundamental for guiding decisions. It doesn't determine decisions. It doesn't mean if a species is threatened, then a given action has to happen, but rather it's to support informing and guiding decisions towards sustainability. Obviously, that's very much the case in conservation programs themselves, in implementation of conservation actions, but also increasingly important in guiding decisions across society as a whole. So guiding decisions in the private sector, guiding decisions by financial institutions, lending institutions, and so on. Guiding decision-making by regional governments, local communities, indigenous peoples, such that decisions can be made, actions carried out in ways that help to reduce the risk of species extinction.
Right. And so interestingly, of course, NatureServe also does ranking of species. We participate in Redlisting, and we're a Red List partner, but we also do a ranking system that is not just global, like the IUCN Red List, but at the national level and at subnational levels. And that's what we call our G ranks and S ranks and all. And so we have a very common sort of set of processes there. And of course, one of the things that we talk about is, something gets on the endangered species list in the United States, and actions are taken to try and recover it. And then sometimes something comes off of the endangered species list, like bald eagles, for example. And so that's a process that's happening with red listing at this time. Is that right?
Yeah, so let's see a couple of points to build from there. So NatureServe's role has been, is, and continues to be an absolutely fundamental one in red listing over the decades. The G ranking system implemented across the NatureServe network is in effect the manifestation of extinction risk assessment within the North American context, and is very much designed to be interoperable, to interlock with the IUCN Red List. That's not just been fundamental for North America, but I'd actually say also, in fact, across the entire of the Western Hemisphere. NatureServe has played absolutely central roles in advancing red listing Americas wide. For example, for amphibians with the global amphibian assessment. And then we started this exchange touching on the new work on assessment of reptile extinction risk. And in that light, it's fantastic to have NatureServe as one of the, I think it's 12 now, Red List partner organizations working together to deliver the Red List program. One other point here, you mentioned their work on green listing, and this is some innovation from over the last few years to develop mechanisms to better document and ultimately better incentivize conservation impact. So to understand, first of all, what would have happened to species status and extinction risk in the absence of conservation actions in the past, and then looking forward to understand what kind of recovery could be targeted across species. And so a green status of species metric has recently been introduced within the overall framework of the Red List program.
Which is great. So one of the things that's coming up here very, very soon is the union is hosting the World Conservation Congress in France. It was postponed for a year because of the global pandemic, of course. And I just wanted to understand what's the purpose of the Congress other than debating subnational units being having a governance role in the union. What are some of the goals and the desires for outcomes from the union's Congress?
Yes, indeed. So very much all-consuming as far as IUCN goes at the moment.
You're expecting 3,000, 4,000 people in person, I believe.
We'll see, and very likely many more online. A point that I'll come back to in a second. So the IUCN World Conservation Congress serves a double function. It serves as a meeting place of the world's conservation community. That's called the forum. An opportunity. I talked earlier about the importance of sharing, of exchange of information, and influence on policy and practice, and the opportunity to meet, to interact, both in person and electronically, is a key part of that. The World Conservation Congress's forum. And then, in addition, as we touched on there on the question of subnational governments, the IUCN World Conservation Congress also provides the highest governance authority of IUCN as a members' assembly, the coming together of the IUCN membership to make a series of key decisions. So as we touched on, the World Conservation Congress is coming up fast. It will be held in September the 3rd through the 11th in Marseille in France, and globally in the virtual arena. And obviously, as you mentioned, we've seen massive impacts, massive changes wrought by the circumstances of the terrible COVID-19 pandemic, including the delay of the Congress from June 2020 to September 2021. That's also opened an opportunity, which is in bringing the virtual proceedings, the opportunity to participate in Congress electronically as well as in person, which I think is a really important new development and one that will certainly be a first for the Congress. In terms of anticipated outcomes, what we hope to accomplish, I think that those outcomes again sort of subdivide between the assembly and the forum, as mentioned there. As far as the assembly goes, we'll see the election of a new IUCN Council, the representative body of IUCN, and a new president, chairs of IUCN's independent expert commissions, and no less than 28 regional councillors. We'll also see a series of debates on key current issues in conservation policy and practice. Those are structured as debates on what are called motions, and if adopted, they form the body of policy of IUCN as a union. They're called resolutions in that term once they're approved. And they include not only the motion on establishing the membership category on subnational governments that we discussed earlier, but also a whole range of other topics, ranging from the post-2020 global biodiversity framework through to intersections between technology and conservation around subjects like synthetic biology. There's also a category for proposal and debate of what are called new and urgent motions, which can be proposed immediately in advance by IUCN's members, immediately in advance of the Congress. And I think we can, given the exceptional circumstances that humanity, that nature, that the world have been facing over the last year and a half, I think we can anticipate that there will be some new and urgent motions, very likely focused on the pandemic and its impacts coming through. Finally, as regards the forum part of the Congress, I think that there's a couple of key areas where we can anticipate some really quite strong outcomes. Some of these relate to guiding and influencing policy in conservation and sustainable development. I've mentioned in passing a couple of times the development of a post-2020 global biodiversity framework, which is under discussion at the moment, likely to be to have the discussion around that advanced as an intergovernmental framework next year in 2022. And so the outcomes from the World Conservation Congress will certainly feed on towards that. Climate change clearly fundamental too, and so the implementation of the Paris Agreement will be another major theme running throughout the Congress forum. And then possibly the most important one and the most timely one takes us immediately back to the key theme of the pandemic as the context here. Obviously, we've seen massive impacts of the pandemic over the last year and a half. Also, maybe the opportunity for societies around the world to take a bit of a reset button, to use the opportunity of recovery from the pandemic to be implemented in a way that is more inclusive of environmental and social sustainability as well as economic sustainability. Right. And so helping to inform how post-pandemic recovery takes place, I would envision being an absolutely key outcome of the Congress's forum.
So interesting. I will be attending in person, assuming that is still possible in a month from now. Looking forward to seeing you and many others in person at that time, and participating virtually, of course, with all of the other folks. There's one other thing I wanted to chat about briefly, because both our organizations are deeply involved in this as well. And this is key biodiversity areas, which is another acronym often abbreviated as KBA. I actually went to a key biodiversity area in Tennessee recently when I was on my Van Humboldt tour of the United States. And it was really interesting to be there. It's a natural area in Tennessee, Frozen Head State Park. But the concept of KBAs is really what I want to get at from you, and why is this an important thing for NatureServe and for the union to be working on?
Yes, indeed. So Key Biodiversity Areas program, very much another kind of key area of intersection between NatureServe and IUCN. So for many decades, back into the early 80s, many different institutions, including NatureServe and its forebearers, have been working on identifying important places for nature. Around the year 2000, it became clear that while all of those efforts had been providing an enormous amount of benefit, that they were at the stage of maturity, that it would be important, that it would be valuable to strengthen the consistency, strengthen the comparability between all of the different approaches being adopted around the world to identify important places. And so IUCN's members in 2004 put a resolution to the 2004 World Conservation Congress asking for development of a global standard for identification of key biodiversity areas as sites contributing significantly to the global persistence of biodiversity. That sounds like an easy job. It wasn't. It actually took 12 years to carry out through a global consultation to agree on what the important criteria would look like for identifying sites contributing significantly to the global persistence of biodiversity. And that work, that standard, was finally completed in 2016. And its launch was accompanied by the establishment of a partnership, bringing together more than a dozen organizations, including both NatureServe and IUCN, to support its implementation. But that implementation fundamentally is a process that takes place at national and subnational levels through what are called national coordination groups, or different kinds of national coordination mechanisms. And so it's been incredibly exciting over the last few years to see the process of formation of these kind of national coordination groups to implement identification of important sites, identification of KBAs. And maybe in the North American context, it's particularly important to highlight Canada here. Canada really provides a fantastic example of this kind of KBA national coordination. NatureServe Canada, I know, has played an absolutely fundamental role in that, process. Mm-hmm. I could easily imagine application of the KBA standard across the USA. Probably actually fundamentally at the state level, working through the Natural Heritage Network with coordination led by NatureServe and interaction with federal and state governments and all of the other relevant institutions. I think that would be something well achievable within the coming decade. So much look forward to seeing that pan out. And building very much from the kind of data and efforts that are already available through NatureServe and the Natural Heritage Network, like the map of biodiversity importance that NatureServe has been pulling together over recent years.
Absolutely, and in fact, we have raised some money to support NatureServe serving as the leader of the committee for KBAs in the United States. So we're excited to be starting to work on that project here coming up soon, because it's going to be really important as we venture into what we call in the United States the Restoring America the Beautiful, but the 30 by 30 program that's sort of a global effort to conserve more habitat. We hope that KBAs will be an important part of that going forward here.
Huge congratulations to you. I much look forward to seeing it pan out.
Thanks. So Tom, is there anything else that you wanted to talk to the audience about? Anything about your work or about the union that we didn't hit on?
I think we've covered the ground very well. Thanks, Sean.
Well, I really appreciate you being on, and I really appreciate everything you've done throughout your career. I know you still have many years in front of you. And so I'm sort of wondering, as you think about those years, do you have an objective that you're trying to reach before you say I don't know if you'll ever hang up your diploma, so to speak, but what would be your big objective in your career?
Hang out my binoculars. No, nothing quite so specific as that. I guess my career objectives are really quite broad ones. Simply to contribute as much as I can to, above all, to reducing species extinctions, currently accelerated by human impacts hundreds of times, maybe 1,000 times faster than normal over our planet's history. And so to reduce those species extinctions as much as possible. Yeah,
and obviously NatureServe and the IUCN are aligned on that goal as well. It's such an important thing to be thinking about. And, as we talk about the sixth extinction, which we do a fair amount on conservation conversations, I really appreciate your dedication to that effort. And I look forward to collaborating and working with you in the future.
Thanks so much for the discussion, Sean. Really gratefully appreciated. Good luck with everything, and all power to NatureServe. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Tom. Really appreciate it.